Hi friends, and welcome back to a new episode of Let's Talk Elvis.
I'd like to talk to you a little bit, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of the things that happened from my side of the story. There's been a lot written and a lot said about what happened to me, but never from my side.
So today I'm going to be hopefully making my last video on this topic. I'm going to be putting it to rest after this. If you guys have seen I think it was my second to last episode, I debunked the whole Elvis, was Elvis a pedophile? Did he marry a 14-year-old? That whole story. I laid out Elvis and Priscilla's relationship for you guys, time frame wise. So how old they were when this happened and when they got married and when she moved in and all that other stuff. And since I've posted that, and even before that episode, I've gotten a lot of DMs asking about this one article that has taken excerpts from Joel Williamson's book, and I believe it's called Elvis Presley, A Southern Life. But basically, there's this article that was written that takes these statements from Joel Williamson's book, and I've gotten a lot of people asking me, is this true? Do you know anything about this? What else could I do other than read it and then research it a little bit? So that is exactly what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm going to be talking about Joel Williamson's statements. He made 6 claims that they included in this article, and so I'm going to be debunking all 6, talking about all 6, and then matching, each one up with a little piece of truth for you guys that basically they just didn't include in the article. So the literal opening of this article was Elvis Presley was a pedophile and a rapist. That was the opening claim of this article. So I just wanted to real quick right off the bat come at you with some definitions of what a pedophile and what a rapist is. I don't feel like anybody needs these definitions, but apparently some people do. When you're accusing people of these things, you should know what they mean. So, a pedophile is sexual interest in prepubescent children. Prepubescent meaning before age 11. Now, there are different branches of this term. Hebephilia, I think I'm pronouncing that right, which is sexual interest in people ages 11 to 14. And then ephebophilia, which is sexual interest in people ages 15 to 16. So there are different branches for different ages, but this article claims Elvis Presley was a pedophile, so therefore they are claiming that he was interested in prepubescent children before age 11. That is what pedophile means. And then a rapist is someone who commits rape, which is unlawful sexual intercourse or any other sexual penetration of another person with or without force, without the consent of the victim. And for what it's worth, that's what those terms mean. So if you're going to, these aren't terms to be taken lightly. We all know this. These are not attributes, that you can just throw around to someone. So I just think it's important to understand exactly what these words mean before we get into this. Now I'm going to move into the 6 claims. And so basically I have my notes here if you guys see me looking down, that's what I'm looking at. And I basically wrote all of the claims on this side, so on this column, and then over here I debunked each claim. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go through number 1, debunk it, number 2, debunk it, and so on and so forth. So bear with me. I promise you guys will want to stick around. The first thing that he claimed was Elvis had girlfriends as young as 14 while he was 22. That was the exact sentence that he used. Basically, they're talking about his touring years, and I talked about this in my other pedophile video, that people make a lot of these claims talking about from when he was 19 to ages 22, because those were the touring years when he was young. Said had girlfriends as young as 14. So I went through, guys, and I read this book, and I'm just telling you this because I want you to know that I am backing up all of my statements with credible sources, and not just pulling information out of thin air. But I went through and I read this entire book. This is called Baby Let's Play House and is by Alana Nash, and it basically details all of the significant relationships Elvis Presley had in his lifetime. So we all know Elvis he can never be with one person at once. So I don't think it's possible for me to sit here and list every single person that he ever saw for those years. But I went through this book and I made a list of all of the significant relationships or girlfriends, as this person states, that he had girlfriends as young as 14. And I went through and I made a list of the girlfriends that he had during this time, their ages and his ages. So I just want to real quick read these off to you. Dixie Locke, the youngest one, she was 14 and Elvis was 18 when they met. I just want to, this is the only one I'm going to delve into, but you might think like, oh my gosh, she was 14. He was 18, and like I've said before, age gap was a thing back then. I'm not gonna get into it. If you want to know more about that, you can go look at my other video that I made on this. But basically, the relationship was literally so pure. Gladys loved her, like Elvis's whole family loved her. Her family loved Elvis. They went to church together every Sunday. It was like the quintessential romance of the 50s. It was so pure, so lovely. She's mentioned in so many documentaries and things like that. So if you want to know more about Dixie, there's information out there. Don't take it as, oh my gosh, he dated a 14-year-old. He was also young. He was 18 years old, and that's a 4-year age gap. That's not bad at all, especially for back then. So anyway, Dixie was 14, Elvis was 18. June Juanico was 17, Elvis was 20. Barbara Hearn was 19, Elvis was 21. Carolyn Bradshaw, she's kind of like more of like a fling, I guess, but I included some of those in here because they were when he was younger. Carolyn was 16 and Elvis was 19. Yvonne Lime was 22 and Elvis was 22. Anita Wood was 19 and Elvis was 22. And Elizabeth Stefaniak, I think I'm pronouncing her last name right, was 19 and Elvis was 23. So, as we can see, there was no shocking age range here. And those were his like for real relationships. Like and people like Elizabeth and Yvonne Lime and, like I said, Carolyn Bradshaw, they were like short-lived romances, but romances nonetheless. And so I wanted to include the significant relationships because the person's claim was that he had girlfriends as young as 14. And in my mind, I'm thinking like girlfriends is somebody that you date and you have a relationship with. The next claim that this person made in the article was, quote, he had a group of girls on tour who would have pillow fights, tickling, cuddling, etc. And apparently these girls were 14 years old and there was a group of 3 of them. And this is probably the #1 DM that I got. People asking like, you know, this person said that he had like these underage girls in his room. What do you know about that? And so I've always wondered as well. And I found the girls, their names were Heidi, Gloria, and Frances. And I can't sit here and tell you that he didn't have this group of girls up in his room, but I can read you some excerpts from Gloria, who was one of the girls up in the room. I'm going to tell you what she said happened up in that room so you can know exactly what went on. The girls insisted that nothing overtly sexual happened. We'd tickle, fight, laugh, mess around, but all you'd have to do is say stop and he'd roll over and quit. He might talk to you about things that bothered him, and just like teenagers, you'd neck a little bit. Elvis was a teenager somewhat. The things we did were things that kids do. They were really all very innocent. A lot of people don't think so, but it was a different day and time. Gloria, thank you so much, because I've been saying that, girl. She literally quoted what I've been saying forever, and that is, it was a different day and time. She basically said that nothing crazy happened. He didn't have sex with all of them. He didn't like have an orgy. It wasn't anything like that. And I also just want to read some quotes that I found from another article, and I believe it was Lana Nash's own words as well. But she said Elvis didn't have sex with young girls. He had pajama parties, pillow fights, and talked just as he did with Gladys. He felt comfy as a perpetual youth, and he was also very insecure. If you know anything about Elvis, you know, like literally the term perpetual youth, so Elvis. Like he never grew up in that way. He never he was always like a young kid at heart, you know what I mean? And also, when she talks about how he did all these things with Gladys, it's like you almost have to have such a firm grip on Elvis's relationship with his mom because it ties into so many different aspects of his life. to understand this kind of stuff, you have to understand his past and stuff that happened with Gladys, because it's so important to the story. And so I'm really happy that she brought that up. And for any of you guys who want to learn more about Elvis and Gladys, I recommend this book, which is called Elvis and Gladys. It's by Elaine Dundee, and it's really good. It really details a lot about the relationship between the duo, the pair, and I recommend that. So that is all I'm gonna say for the second point. The third point, so this is the quote: had a girlfriend at age 15. So basically they're saying he had a 15-year-old girlfriend. A 15-year-old girl, who was it? It was Dixie Locke. And when she was 15, Elvis was 19, girl. That's 4 years. That's not bad at all. So I don't even know why that's supposed to be controversial. Number 4, always needing a woman in bed. Okay, so I've heard this a lot, and Elvis suffered with insomnia, okay? And that is a disease. A lot of people don't credit it as one, but insomnia can literally ruin your life. As we can see, like, it really had a really deep impact on Elvis's. And he had insomnia from a young age. And so he was scared to be alone. And I'm not even sitting here like making excuses. He said it numerous times. He was scared to be alone. He used to like sleepwalk. I feel like at one point he said he almost like walked out a window at some, like, girl. So he was afraid to be left alone. So what was he literally going to do? Sleep with like one of his guy friends? No. So I feel like the only logical explanation, in my opinion, is that he knew that women wanted to be there, and he needed them there. He needed somebody there. Even on tour, he didn't have his mom there. Like, he was away from home. He didn't have that comfort that he used to have. And that's something that he needed. Whether it be weird to us, maybe it's something that we wouldn't do, but it's not our head. It's Elvis's head, and it's his mental process and how he felt emotionally, and all of these different layers combined. Literally, what else was he gonna do? Sleep with, like, Red West? I don't know, like, what else. He worked out in his mind that there's people who wanted to be there and he needed them there, so that's what he did. Rarely ever was it about sex, ever. That wasn't the purpose of this. He literally just wanted, and there's so many accounts of this too, where he just like begs his girlfriend to, like, June Wanako, for example. He's like, just spend the night with me, like, just sleep over. I'm not gonna touch you. I won't do anything you don't want me to do. I just want to hold you. I would call it a phobia, or like it all played in a part together. Number 5, he was obsessed with virginity. I've heard this so many times, and it's like, okay, and like, he wasn't obsessed with virginity. He slept with women who weren't virgins, first of all. And second of all, I think the logical explanation to this was that he was Elvis Presley. He had to be careful. Like, he can't go around like getting sexually transmitted diseases and like sleeping around with all these women, not knowing like how it's going to affect his life was for everybody else to see. Like, if he screwed up, everybody knew about it, and it could end his career. I think that was part of it. And I also think, in my opinion, maybe the pressure to perform, like, for somebody who's already been experienced, I think that, in my opinion, he had that kind of, well, I'm seen as this sex symbol, I'm seen as this like god, so that's how they're gonna expect me to be intimately. And so I feel like that kind of weighed really heavy on his mind as well. And I think that's another reason why he rarely ever did the act, is because, not rarely ever, but you guys know what I mean, he preferred not. We don't have to get into that, but like, I think it's partly because the pressure to perform was on him at all times. And so being obsessed with virginity, it's a preference. Like, if you don't want to sleep with someone who's like, that's not for me to judge. That's not for you to judge either. There's nothing wrong with that, I feel. And I don't think he was obsessed with it. That is totally the wrong word, and it's blowing it way out of proportion. But if he preferred to sleep with someone who hasn't slept around with a lot of people, there's a lot of factors that weigh into that as well. I am on to the final statement, and this one, y'all, this one is a big one. and you're gonna wanna buckle up for this. So, we're gonna be talking about the rapist section of this. Like I said in the beginning, the title claim to this article was Elvis Presley was a pedophile and rapist. So we're gonna delve into the rapist part, and I totally know what they mean. Everybody knows what they mean, and they also included what they meant, so. But we all know they're talking about the whole Priscilla and Elvis. Quoted from the article, when she arrived in Memphis to announce she was no longer in love with him and was separating, he went into a jealous rage and raped her. She writes that Elvis grabbed her and forcefully made love to her, saying, "This is how a real man makes love to his woman." Unquote. We know that Priscilla, she has said things, right? And she said things in her book and in public statements and interviews and things like that that she has taken back or somehow molded into like a different statement. For example, when she says that Elvis didn't sleep with her after Lisa Marie was born, she also said that Elvis did sleep with her after Lisa Marie was born. And those are completely like not even related. Like you can't say he did, but he also didn't, you know what I mean? We know that Priscilla has done this a lot. She contradicts herself a lot. And she did it with this statement as well. She said that Elvis grabbed her and forcefully made love to her, saying, "This is how a real man makes love to his woman." But then, in an article for The Times, she said she regretted her choice of words in describing the incident and said it had been an overstatement. I feel like Priscilla has said things that this book was written in the 80s, okay? And so when someone said in the 80s forcefully made love, it might not completely register that that was rape because a lot of stuff, like it was a different time back then, so it might not have been like people read that statement and was like, "Oh, that's rape. I can't believe that he raped her." That didn't really happen. But now, in 2021, when we have a bigger grasp on what everything means and we can comprehend this more, people are reading this statement and being like, she's insinuating that he raped her. And so now she has to fix herself, fix her statement to fit with today's standards because that's not what she meant. She didn't mean for that to come across that way. But now, because people are perceiving it in this way, and she's already written the book in the 80s, she has to make it okay for 2021. And she has to restate it so that people in 2021 can understand how she meant it to come across. So I want to read an article from Child Bride talking about this incident because I think this clears up a lot. When she arrived, she said Elvis forced himself on her sexually, saying, "This is how a real man makes love to his woman." Priscilla claimed later it was then that she made the decision to leave Elvis and that she waited until the next day as she was preparing to return to Los Angeles to tell him, never mentioning Mike Stone, which if you don't know who Mike Stone is, that's the person that she left Elvis for, her karate instructor. Elvis, according to her description, was surprised and anguished. Elvis told a different story in his divorce declaration several months later. He said that it was he who confronted Priscilla about Mike Stone that night in Vegas, and that she was surprised he knew about the affair. This is very plausible, for Elvis had already heard about Mike from Joe, and Priscilla had told Elvis at Christmas time that she wanted out of the marriage. Priscilla's claim that Elvis was surprised to hear that she was leaving him just did not make sense. Jerry Schilling, who later worked on the miniseries based on Priscilla's autobiography, which included the rape scene in Elvis's dressing room, admitted that it didn't sound like Elvis to force himself on Priscilla sexually. Nor did Priscilla tell Joan, who was her best friend and who flew back to LA with her the next day, that Elvis had raped her. It would have been illogical for Elvis, without any discussion of Mike or divorce and without provocation, to call Priscilla to his dressing room and force her to make love to him. "I can see," offered Joan, "that a man in his ego might think, okay, I'll get her back one way or another, that it'll all turn around." If you know anything about Elvis, it's that he had the biggest ego known to mankind. And so I definitely feel like that, and I've always thought the same thing. I always thought like I don't think it was like rape you. I think it was, I'll show you that we can like save this, or like one more time, you know, for old time's sake, let's try and like we belong together. Like, let's make it known that like we can, you know what I mean? Like that, like a desperate plea of like, we can do this, we can fix this. And they couldn't, like it was gone. So those are all statements that this person has made. When I was reading this article, I got angry, and I know this is because I'm so sensitive as a person, but also towards Elvis. I am just so protective, and that gets the better of me a lot. But I feel like this article literally held no educational value or purpose. It just dramatized and exposed these situations, and the whole point of it was just to take these situations and turning it into some crude, vulgar, and unnecessary exaggerations. There's no other purpose for this other than to make it seem like Elvis was this sick, mentally disturbed criminal. You will not read this article and walk away saying oh, okay, I understand this better. All you're gonna do is read this and be like, that's disgusting, I'm never gonna like him again. And that's the whole problem. Just for example, I'm gonna insert the closing statement to this article right here for you guys to read. And I don't understand why any of this was necessary to include. The whole part about the pajamas and dying on the toilet and the drug-induced death. There's so much more to the story that you could have. This is irrelevant. What he was wearing and where he died is irrelevant to, number one, your statement that you're making. It's not that hard if you care enough, like I've been saying, if you care enough, then put in the work and find out what happened really. If you care that Elvis had 3 girls up in his bedroom at one point when he was touring, then find out about it. Find out about who they were, what they had to say, right from the mouth of the people who were there, girl. I read it to you. Those girls who were up there, exactly what they felt like happened. You couldn't get any closer than that. The people who were there are the best people to draw the information from. Oh, I wish these articles would stop being written. I know they won't, but it's just really sad that people take these statements and just blow them up and exaggerate them and make Elvis seem like something he wasn't. That's the whole point of these. I want to end off saying this. Elvis, literally, I feel like if he knew about this kind of stuff to a certain extent, I feel like he'd be bothered a little bit. But at the end of the day, they're not his fans. So why do you care? Why would you care about what people who don't like Elvis think about Elvis? It's just hard because I want everybody to know how great Elvis was, but some people just are never gonna like Elvis, and they're always gonna find something wrong with him and a reason not to like him. But as long as you know, and that's my whole point, is as long as you know the truth and you know how to, if you want to stick up for him, if you want to be able to have his back, as long as you know how to do that, that's all you can do. You just gotta, what did he say? Kill it and put it behind you. If people don't like you or like what you stand for or like Elvis, you're probably not gonna change their minds. So just kill it and put it behind you, in the words of our man. So that is all I have for you guys today. Hope this cleared up some questions that you guys have had about this article, because I know it's been going around and people have been reading it. So if you have any more questions or comments or anything, please feel free to leave them down below. If you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and make sure to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, so that we can talk more Elvis together in the future. And I will talk to you guys soon in my next video. Bye.